Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me.
So Damien's been playing Gundam, some kind of Gundam game,
Okay.
and I think it's an import. It's quite something.
Is it like a fighting game or?
It's hard to say. It kind of I guess it's a sort of mech game where you're fighting other mechs, other Gundams. So it just seems to be sort of a like Rocket League, but just Gundams. I don't play games like that, so it's hard for me to describe it, I guess.
Rocket League plus Gundams.
Yep.
Do you know what kind of game Rocket League is?
Yo, yeah.
It's a race. It's like not a racing game. It's like a fucking soccer game.
I know.
So
Just go with it, Drew.
Is this Gundam soccer?
Uh,
Is there a goalie? Which Gundam is the goalie?
Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself.
Gundam goalies 2020. Hey everybody, welcome to Will and Drew's Gaming Retrospective. You're listening to the #1 Connecticut-based video game and gardening podcast. It's episode 85 for the week of July 12th, 2020. I'm your host, Drew. I'm joined by Will. What's up, man?
What's up? What's up, Drew?
Tired. I'm really
you
fucking
mowed the
tired.
lawn today.
I mowed the lawn, and it's like 85 degrees and humid. And I was telling you before, we bag our lawn clippings because we put them in the garden. And it provides two things to the garden. First of all, it's, the clippings will break down and kind of help fertilize everything. And secondly, it helps with weed control because now you have like this layer of dead grass that's like an inch or two thick. And weeds are definitely an issue in there. But like when you're bagging the clippings, it just adds so much more work to the process. So what should take me, about an hour on like a cool fall day, now takes 2.5 hours to do on like a hot summer day. Plus, the bagging process. So
yeah, and you're just dealing with like hot lawn clippings and bending over and picking things up, and it's a lot in this kind of heat. The sun has just been very, very much a scorcher lately.
It has been. On top of all that, I've been fighting with a groundhog.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
We have a groundhog that's been getting into the garden. 2 groundhogs, actually. I've seen 2 of them. A couple days ago, I was standing in my kitchen, and I see the 2 fuckers hanging out near the fence. I went out there with a broom and chasing them like, fucking Braveheart out of the yard with a broom in my hand.
Freedom!
Nikki watches me, like, running across the yard with, like, my moccasins on and the broom like above my head with two fisting the broom like
Oh my goodness, this is like a 90s sitcom.
Yeah, it was great. But they're not in my yard. Like they're like burrowing in somebody else's yard, so I can't do shit about it, like unless I like get traps and trap them.
Dude, we had these things in our lawn that my brother-in-law installed, and they're like They sort of give off these sound waves for like sonar, and they make these loud beeping sounds that apparently moles and things like that don't like. So I don't know if that would help, but maybe it's worth a shot.
My father tried those in his yard a few years ago. I don't think he had good luck, but it is something worth researching again. Maybe it's, improved or better, or maybe it did work for him and I just misunderstood. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I remember seeing a hole right next to one of them, so there's that.
Oh, man. Well, that's all I got. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, man, that's about it. Everything's good with you?
Yeah, just plugging away at work and, gaming, and I beat a game that I'm really excited to talk about on today's show.
Yeah. Very excited.
So, yeah, besides or outside of that, I guess everything else has just been kind of the norm.
Well, I'm super excited to chat about Final Fantasy VII Remake with you. Let's not bury the lead here. And yeah, I mean it's going to be a pretty simple episode. We have that, and we have the mailbag, and that's it. So let's plug our shit, and then we'll get right to it. What do you say?
Let's dive in.
All right, man. So check us out on the web, WDGRPodcast.com. You can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at WDGR Podcast. That's at WDGR Podcast. It stands for Will and Drew's Gaming Retrospective. Sometimes I forget that part. We're on YouTube. We got clips for our YouTube channel. So if you want to hear little snippets of our episodes, or maybe there's a discussion that you've heard on our show, and maybe we put it up there, and you want to share that with your friends, relatives. Maybe your gaming grandmother wants to hear a new gaming podcast. Yeah.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. Gaming Granny is real. She kicks ass.
I'm pretty sure there's some elderly lady out there that plays Skyrim religiously.
There is. And there's also some elderly woman that plays like CSGO and stuff too. Like every once in a while.
Honestly, I think that's pretty cool.
I think it's incredible. You know,
because most retired folks that I see around here in the neighborhood, they don't really do jack shit. You know, it's picking up twigs in the yard and, you know, wiping off their hands, checking the mail, and doing that maybe a few more times, and then calling it a day.
Granny hasn't seen sunlight in 2 years, but she's got 120 hertz on her monitor. Oh god. Anyway,
just upgrading to 4K displays.
Will, if somebody wants to follow you on social media, how can they find you?
Will_gear.
And you can find me at ScionStorm. Last week, we opened up the mailbag to our listeners, and we had a great question from Son of a Fitch asking about co-op gaming. And we got some feedback from some people after the episode, so we kind of threw it out to the mailbag again. And let's actually start with Twitter, shall we?
Sure.
This one comes from at Dean Warwick NZ. He says, my favorite co-op experience was as a kid with my mom, Sonic the Hedgehog. I was Sonic and she was Tails, and she could come back from the dead and do most of the work. It was a simple time on Sega Mega Drive.
Good times. Yeah, those games were fun, man. I mean, I wasn't really a Sega person, but I remember playing some of them, and they were a blast. Yeah,
Sonic was always my jam, and I always had a hard time finding people to really play with. I had one neighbor that lived across the street from me. They had the Genesis, I had the Super Nintendo, and I was never into Mario. I always wanted to play Sonic, so we would play Sonic and Tails or Sonic and Knuckles, or any variation of that. Whether it was split screen or just passing the controller back and forth. It was a good time. But
sure.
most of our gaming together ended up being like games like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, shit like that. Let's see here. As far as replies, last week we also had let's see here. Son of a Fitch said, I swear Dead Space 3 is playable in one day. He dedicated a whole day to playing it. I enjoyed the comment about playing with your parents, though. I have a fond memory of my mom and I playing Simpsons Road Rage back in the day, and my dad and I switching on and off with Duke Nukem. That's a good one. Epic Outro says, listening to Will talk about his co-op experiences with Resident Evil 5. I also had a blast with that game in co-op. Me and Scott played it over several days in the basement of my parents' house when it first came out. Probably my best co-op experience since the old Mortal Kombat days. It's only been rivaled recently with my Fortnite crew. And Pucksaur says there was a call out for best co-op moments in the episode, and I can't believe that Comp Stomp the Computer in any strategy game didn't come up. And that is a fair point. Are you familiar with that phrase, Comp Stomp?
You know what? I don't think I am.
So basically, the general gist of a Comp Stomp... Oh, my watch just started talking to me. Comp Stomp is when you take like the easiest computer opponent possible and you slaughter it. So in strategy games, it'll usually be like, you have like a team of 2 or 3 or 4 people, human controlled, against like 1 or 2 computers, and you put them on the easiest difficulty, and you just sit back, you relax, and you annihilate the computer.
Huh.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that.
It's fun. It's not meant to be challenging in any way. It's just meant to, just have a good time playing games with your buds.
That's cool.
He also says, growing up though, the Sven co-op mod for Half-Life was awesome, and it added a grappling hook for no reason. Can't imagine playing Half-Life with a grappling hook. Going into this week, Patrick from Retrospectives Podcast says, my favorite co-op memories are from Halo 2. Not from actually playing the game as intended, but instead messing around with all the stupid Easter eggs and exploring the levels. Best of all was acquiring the Scarab gun, which required an elaborate string of silly actions to actually reach. The prize was worth it, though.
I don't think I'm aware of that in terms of exploring, doing this string of silly actions to actually reach it.
Yeah, I don't remember the Scarab gun at all.
I think I do, but I think I might be confusing it with the needle or the needler.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Scarab gun.
I'm looking at it on Halo.
Googs.
Yeah. Halo.fandom.com, and It just looks like a regular plasma rifle to me. I don't know. Anyway, Patrick, follow up with us. Let us know precisely what you're talking about.
I mean, I will say that I remember exploring some of those levels just on my own, I believe. I think, if I remember correctly, there was a way to go into the levels on your own. Like, you would stage a multiplayer game, and you could go in and you could explore where all of the power-ups are and the guns and the swords and everything, and just kind of walk around and do shit.
It's been so long since I fired up, like, the original copy of Halo 2 by myself that I couldn't tell you. But that sounds about right. A lot of those, early online games, there was a way of setting up like a private mode where you can just kind of do your own thing with or without people. So that would seem legit to me.
Yeah, pretty sure that was a feature.
Joe Donut says, nowadays I feel like co-op games are such a known quantity. Most people co-op Destiny or The Division, Dark Souls and its copycats, or games like Minecraft and No Man's Sky. While it's really nice to have games that you can rely on friends to actually buy and play with you, I've always have a place in my heart for the niche co-op games I've managed to play. A few weeks ago, my wife and I played through Man of Medan? Medan? I don't know. I almost said Median. Man of Medan, which was essentially a playable horror movie. You can make decisions that not only change the story, but that the other player doesn't necessarily know about. A Way Out was pretty recent, and basically had you and a friend escape prison together and go on the run looking for people who framed you. The whole game takes place in split screen, so you can always see what the other player is doing. There's also that phenomenon where a bad game can become a good co-op game, and I've definitely taken advantage of that over the years. Resident Evil 5, Army of 2, Dead Space 3, and even the earlier Gears of War games were bad to average games. I had a total blast playing with a friend. I'm sure there have been worse ones, but I can't think of them right now. I don't know that I would call Gears of War bad to average. The first game and even the second game, I think, I think they were pretty well done. But yeah, I agree with that. Like, my fondest memories of Gears of War are from the co-op experience. It was never really, I think, intended to be a single player. It was always kind of built around that co-op experience. Army of 2, explicitly so. Playing that game by yourself is just downright boring. But if you're playing with somebody else, that is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that there are some bad co-op games that can be good. And Resident Evil 5 really is one of them. I remember, I think I mentioned on the last episode that it was a bad game, but it was a pretty good co-op experience. And I remember at the time when Tom and I were looking and sort of searching for co-op games to play, it was on a lot of lists that we looked at. And it ended up becoming, a game that we played. So
yeah, I need to find more time for more co-op games in my life.
Well, the hardest thing about it is finding the time to arrange that gameplay with somebody else at the same time. When Tom and I play on Sunday mornings, it's not always at the same time. It's sometimes hard to get together. And I think that's the biggest challenge when you are at the stage that we're at, trying to say like, hey, 6:00 every Monday, it just never seems to work out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as adults, shit comes up, or, maybe you just don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
Quite honestly,
absolutely.
That happens, so you cancel plans or make other plans or whatever.
It requires commitment,
It
and a
does.
lot of us don't always want to be committed when we're done with a job that we generally don't really like. We're like, I just want to like wallow in my misery
Yeah.
and do things when I want to do them, and the last thing you want to do is have like another email come through saying like, hey, like just a reminder, this is coming up in 15 minutes, Resident Evil 5, and you're just like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
I want to do it on my terms, damn it.
Exactly.
So it becomes kind of that, but
It's a good point, though. It's an excellent point. I don't know how people who have like regular, gaming nights on a you know weekly basis or even a daily basis can manage, like keeping up with a guild or something like that. That's impressive. It takes dedication.
oh God, yeah. I mean, I still haven't even really picked Tom's brain about how he's in a ESO guild, but
Yeah.
apparently he's quite active in it, and I'm not really sure how he does it, but he does.
Good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, he's enjoying it.
Pucksaur says, my favorite sort of co-op memory is when we ran giant Ethernet wire between two houses in our friends group that happened to be on the same block. We set up Xboxes on that and would play house versus house 4v4 games, the sort of co-op part. At the time, it was 2v4, and I was relatively bad at console first-person shooters on the 2 side. My friend had to go eat dinner, so I held off an entire house on my own. Not only that, but when my friend came back and saw what was happening, he snuck out the back and stole their flag. He's talking about the ice level in Halo 1. I can't remember the name of it, but I know which one he's talking about. Yeah, I mean, like, that's something that, we experienced, Will, a couple times was, the Halo with Ethernet. It wasn't between houses. It was all in the same house.
Yes.
But we had, like, I think at one point, we had, like, 6 Xboxes going,
at least.
With various degrees of people, we'd have some systems with 4 players. We'd have, those that were on a smaller TV, maybe only 1 or 2 people. Damien used to bring his own monitor. So he would have his own Xbox and, his own spot and everything. And it was a great time. Very fun memories.
It really was great. It was magical. Having those moments where you're playing in Vincey's room, I think I was in it one night, and we're cooped up in a corner where his, tube TV was right near his window. And, you're just hanging out with friends in the same room and you're playing a game that you all love. And there's so much camaraderie. It just reeks of camaraderie. And it's so hard to imagine that, especially with what we've been dealing with in the past 6 months.
Yeah. I can't remember, the last time that I've thought to myself, man, it would be great to have people over to play video games,
Yeah, I mean, look at the day that I did game day here. I mean, that was a blast.
It was a total blast, but now it's like with the world, being what it is, like it's a huge risk having so many people indoors, and like I would love to have everybody over. But
I hope we can get back to that.
Me too. So, folks, if you ever have any questions that you'd like to submit or any comments on any of our previous episodes, hit us up on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at WDGRPodcast. Or the best way is really just swing on by our Discord room. There's a link for that in the show notes and, of course, on our website at WDGRPodcast.com, where you can chat with all kinds of awesome people. And Will.
Yes.
Oh, man, I'm super excited to talk to you about this game, bud.
Yeah, this has been kind of a long time coming.
Final Fantasy VII Remake. You have beaten it.
I have, and I gotta say, I am so proud of myself for beating a 40-hour game. Took me about 44 hours. And just proud in general that I've just been beating games more.
Me too, man.
And both of us.
Yeah.
I was telling Joe the other day when we were playing Battlefield, I was like, man, like it feels so good to be able to say that I've actually been beating games and not little indie games, God of War, Last of Us, Strider, Final Fantasy Remake. I think that's it.
Yeah.
But I'm still pretty proud of it.
Hey, man, listen, compared to last year, you're already ahead.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm not stopping. I feel like there's a lot of momentum for both of us, and I'm really looking forward to continuing my journey of beating games.
Yeah, I mean, like, right now, I'm about 30 hours into The Last of Us 2, and I feel like I'm getting close to the end. Once I finish that, I'm not really sure what I'm going to play next. I'll probably kind of prod the Discord room for some ideas, but I'm really feeling like something retro. I haven't spent a lot of time with my TurboGrafx Mini. I'd like to kind of dive into that and play some of those games. And I was talking about possibly playing some of the Star Trek games that I've acquired over the years, because those are always fun. They're always bad, but they're always fun. So that might make good content for the podcast, just to talk about how bad a Star Trek game is for half an hour.
Well, see, that's just it, dude. Is like, I feel like if you're gonna play a Star Trek game, you better love the show. You better love the franchise, because that kind of game, it's short. I mean, Star Wars games are definitely a lot better, but in fairness, I've never played a Star Trek game, but I would imagine that
Star Wars games are a lot better. Let's stop right there.
Okay. But yeah, I would imagine that if you're going to buy a Star Trek game, like I said, you better love that franchise, because it's probably a terrible game.
I low key have a goal of owning like every console version of every Star Trek game possible.
Oh my word!
I have a better head start than you might think.
I'm sure you do.
There's quite a few games that have been made over the years. Some of them are pretty good, and some of them are questionable. And I could probably do a whole episode on that. But we're here to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Just a spoiler warning. I'm anticipating that you're going to be getting into spoilers.
I will.
I don't want you holding back spoilers on my accord, so I would say let's just break it down, dive in, and let's get into the nitty-gritty. If you have not played Final Fantasy VII Remake up to this point, dear listener, and you do not want to have any spoilers for the game, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, pretty much. I hate to make it so abrupt, but that is exactly what Drew said is nothing but the truth. So
yeah, we're going to end the show.
You have been
warned. we're ending the show with this. We're going to talk about this for a while. So
yeah. All right. So what I said to you kind of before the show, I'm not doing what we normally do, which is kind of a consensus on every single aspect of the game. What I'm going to do is go through the good, the bad, and a few other topics. So what I'll do first is I'll go through the good, and then feel free to ask me some questions, and I think it would be better for me to kind of expand on some things. Well, that way I'm not just rambling.
Yeah, well, before you dive into the good, can we just kind of talk about your experience with the original game, just to kind of set the scene, and then what it was like popping in the new version for the first time, and what that felt like.
Sure. No, I think that's a great place to start. So I did not play Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 when everybody else did. I watched people play, my buddy Miles, who listens to the show, and a few other people. And I think at the time I just wasn't really into RPGs, so I never got it. Long story short, I ended up getting it many, many moons later, and I played the original copy. I think it was a greatest hits on a PlayStation 3. So that is how I started, on a PlayStation 3 with the original disc. And I fell in love with it pretty quickly. From the moment that the game starts to how the story starts, unfolding, and you're reading the dialogue, because there was really I don't think there was any dialogue, sounds, or voices at all in the original.
There weren't.
And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Now, I have a weird history with it, though. So I started it and stopped it so many times, and it was basically just due to weird issues with internal memories getting deleted. The PlayStation 3 has an internal PS1 memory card, and I had issues with it, I think, on my fat PS3, because I think I got the yellow light of death, if I remember correctly, on my fat PS3, so that sucked. So I lost the file, and I had to start it again. And I want to say I started the game a total of at least 3 times and kept getting up to a very similar point, and then just never completing it. And that point that I got up to, I think, was always somewhere on disc 2, where you discover some other characters, some optional characters, and whatnot.
Okay.
And I think ultimately it just ended up becoming a very long game, and I think that's really just why I never finished it, because I was having all these issues getting up to a point and having something happen. I just never really went back to start it again. So when the sort of remaster came out on PS4, I believe it was, where they just kind of touched up the visuals and made it a little less blurry, I guess.
Yeah.
It kind of sharpened up some of the polygons. I almost got that version because for the longest time now, I think it's been about $15.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I never got it because I think at the time that I was thinking about it, FF7 Remake was announced, and I thought, all right, well, this is going to take some time to come out, so maybe I'll just wait. And I kind of went back and forth and mulled it over, and then eventually, before you know it, FF7 Remake was released. And if I remember correctly, I also did not buy this day one, but I think it was week one that I got it. And I'm sure glad I did, because it has been a pretty tremendous experience for the most part.
Okay. So, week one, you're talking a $60 purchase. You've put in roughly 40 hours to it. Do you think you got your money's worth?
I would say so. Yeah, without a doubt. So, and, even though I have some complaints that I'm going to get into in a little bit, overall, the experience was definitely worth $60. And I think they did a great job making this game. That is an extremely short consensus of it before we kind of dive in.
Excellent. So, yeah, let's start with some of your good.
Sure. So, visuals, first thing, definitely caught my attention. The character models are really, really faithful, I think, to how you would imagine Cloud's outfit to be, for example. It's hard to say because he was sort of wearing this polygon purple fucking suit in the original. So, now that you see him in an actual outfit that looks real, it's really nice to see that. And I think they did a really good job with the visuals overall. There are some muddy textures here and there in different aspects of the world, but within the character designs, there really are not many flaws at all that I was able to notice. Like his hair looks really good, his face, they blink. There's a lot of attention to detail with the character models, and I think that's generally what you're looking at the most. So very impressed with the character design. Next would be soundtrack. I think we've spoken about this before, and I think we can all agree that whether you played the demo or some of the actual full game, there's no question that the soundtrack is amazing. They obviously have redone the tracks, so they're not the original sort of MIDI files. They're done with, I believe, some kind of live orchestra or whatever. But all of it sounds incredible. More so in, I would say, about 70 to 80% in the game. And then as the game goes on, I started to sort of not recognize the tracks. And I don't know if it's just because they changed them entirely or if I forgot. But in the beginning, you hear all of the most familiar tracks that you remember, like Tifa's theme and Aerith's theme and all of the basic themes that you would hear in the game. I know that a lot of the tracks had weird titles like Anxiety and stuff like that. Yeah. If you look at the actual soundtrack, there's tons of tracks.
Well, it's the original soundtrack for the game is 4 discs.
Yes. You're talking about the original game, right?
Yes, for the original game.
Yeah. So a lot of those tracks that we've come to know and love, like Prelude and stuff, are all extremely faithful and are just goosebump worthy, 100%. I absolutely loved it. I don't think there was anything about the music that I didn't like. There was a couple themes that are so catchy that it's scary. Like you'll be in the shower and you'll be, kind of humming the Wall Market theme, which is good and bad because it's a great theme, but it's so repetitive that it really sticks with you. So that can be kind of a nuisance. Battles can be fun, and they generally look really cool. There's lots of style with the battles, and I know that you and I kind of spoke about how when we played the demo, it felt a little button mashy, and it didn't feel like the turn-based combat that we were used to, or perhaps what we were expecting. And I can say that as time goes on, and you spend more time with learning the different commands and how the whole flow is that they've created, it really does become way more cohesive, and I really enjoyed it, and most people did as well. Can
you expand on this battle system for me a little bit? Because my experience with this begins and ends at the demo.
Sure.
And that was a huge deciding factor in me not getting the remake, because the combat turned me off, and I've heard multiple people say that really the combat in the demo is a bad representation of what the combat system becomes. It kind of ends before it becomes truly good. if that
I
makes sense.
couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I never actually finished the demo. I don't think I did. So, but what I played of it was a very, pretty much exactly on par review of what you said. I felt like it was button mashy. And here's how it basically transforms out of that. So you have operator mode, which is Cloud's basic mode that he's just sort of defaulted into, which is, I wouldn't say it's button mashy, but you do have to tap square to swing his sword. So there's no way out of that. Mm-hmm. And that can feel button mashy if you are just kind of mashing on it and you just start swinging the sword. So in order to kind of get out of that feeling, you have to block, and you also have to use Punisher mode. And that's by tapping triangle. You go into a sort of defensive mode where you move more slowly, and you probably did experience that in the demo. But when you understand how it works and how you can sort of block differently when you're in that mode, and you have different attacks with Cloud's sword in that mode, when you start experimenting with bouncing back between the two of them and incorporating blocking and incorporating what's it called, tactical mode, which is where time slows down and you can start using abilities, when you develop a flow that works for you within the battle, everything just starts clicking and the whole idea of button mashing just disappears. So I know that's kind of a quick version of it, but it's the best way I can describe it.
Did you find yourself switching in and out of the different modes, or did you find like a certain mode that just worked best for you?
So honestly, I didn't use Punisher mode that much really at all. I wish I did, because I didn't realize that you can kind of, I think there's some sort of counter block that's sort of built into Punisher mode, and I wasn't aware of that until late game. And I was using operator mode, so I was button mashing a little bit, and I didn't feel like I was so much anymore, because the whole idea about this game is you want to build up your ATB meter, which will allow you to do those abilities like Braver and Focus Thrust, and whatever else you might have equipped to that particular sword, because each sword that Cloud has obviously will have different abilities and special moves and limits and all that kind of stuff. So,
hold on. So they tied the limit breaks into the different weapons?
You know, I'm glad you said that, because I don't think so. I meant to really say that there's different special abilities built into each weapon.
Okay.
But the limit that Cloud has, I believe, is the same no matter what. I think it's like triple slash or something like that. No, it's not triple slash.
Cross slash,
it's
I think it was.
cross slash. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually incorrect about that. But
the way the original game worked, your characters, I'm trying to pull from memory here, so please correct me, listeners, if I'm wrong here, but my memory serves me. You have 4 limit breaks that, as you go through the game, you unlock. Each character gets 4 of them. And if I'm not mistaken, you can use, once you get your limit, like, you can use any of those 4, but you have to unlock them first.
Mm-hmm.
And if I believe that, I'm trying to remember if it was tied into leveling or if it was like a story arc thing. I don't remember. I'd have to look into it. So cross slash in Final Fantasy VII would be Cloud's first limit break, but eventually he gets others.
Yes. If my memory serves me correctly, then absolutely. But yes, when you experiment with different weapons, the combat does get a little bit more interesting with some of the abilities, and the abilities like Braver, stuff that you remember using in the original, look really good. A lot of those reimaginations were done really well, and I think the combat overall was just such a highlight for this game, because it just looks so good, it performs well, and there is a progression that happens. It takes time to get past that button mashing phase and realize that it's not a button masher, it's just you are dealing with a character who does have to swing a sword, and the only way to do that is to tap square. So it just kind of ends up being that way, but I promise you that it does sort of dissipate as you start using tactical mode, which is so much fun to use when you have that ability to attack. Your ATP gauge is maxed out, or the first bar is highlighted and ready to use. Then you tap, I believe it's X. You pull up the menu and you can use Braver, Focus Thrust, whatever it is that you want to do. You can heal. You can switch to a different character. I actually learned not right away, that you can switch with some of the, I think it's like R2 and L2.
Okay.
You can switch when you're in tactical mode and start, having other commands brought out for other characters, and it just becomes a much deeper experience the more that you play around with it.
Interesting. So, like with this tactical mode, then, like, my experience with it in the demo was primarily like issuing magic commands. Does it go beyond that? Like, can you do physical commands as well?
When you say physical, what do you mean exactly?
Like attack, just regular attacks.
Like when you're in tactical mode?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What it ends up becoming is this interesting blend, or this concoction of different moves and abilities that you start sort of just mapping out for everybody, and then you just watch it unfold. So it becomes like, I don't know how you would describe it, because I haven't played a lot of those kind of games where you can sort of map things out for characters and then just watch it happen. I want to say a lot of strategy games are like that. Even turn-based RPGs can be like that. But this does it in such a unique way that it just feels really fun, and you get kind of excited about when you're like, all right, what do I want Barrett to do? Because Barrett's got his ATB cage ready. Do I want to finish him off with big shot, or overdrive, or focused shot? Whatever it is, you start getting creative, and then the more you go back and forth, you're just like messing around in all these combat menus, and it seems a little bit redundant at first, but when you get used to it, it becomes fun, and you sort of enjoy giving those commands, and it becomes more turn-based when you start experiencing that.
Okay. Yeah,
it's just done differently.
The combat system really fascinates me, and that's kind of what my biggest hang-up was. So I have like tons of questions. I'm trying to just ask what I could think of as we kind of
course,
come across it. All right, well, go on. You can go.
Sure. Summons are really sweet. I think
me about
a lot
those.
of people were. Yeah, a lot of people, I think, were curious to see, what was Ifrit going to look like, and he was obviously a pretty popular summon in the original, and he looked really cool in the original too, and he looks even cooler in the remake. He's bigger, brighter, everything just looks, obviously sort of next gen, and it's cool because when you get a summon, it stays there for a while, and you see this sort of Mission Impossible fuse burning the whole time on it, so it's got like this little meter. And you have a lot of time to use the summon. So let's say you're fighting a boss, which is generally when they would come up. And at first, when you get that summon, you might be like, oh yeah, I'm going to summon Ifrit right now, and I'm just going to melt this dude.
Yeah.
And if you summon too early, he doesn't melt the dude, and then you're fucked. Or you got to figure out a way to deal with it after the summon's already been sort of quote-unquote wasted. So I learned fairly early on that you want to save the summons for when the boss is almost done.
Okay.
Not, a sliver of health, but you want to wait until maybe a quarter worth of the health is left on the boss. Then you want to summon Ifrit and have Ifrit do most of the work to finish him off. Now, you could summon him early. It's all about your choice, right? But I found that it was more productive to wait and use Ifrit or any of the other summons more towards the end of the boss fight. But they look cool, man. The reimaginations of what these summons look like are really impressive. You have summon abilities, so when they have been summoned, you can go into your ability list, and then you can go to summon ability, and I think most of them had at least 2 different abilities. So you could do, say, Crimson Dive, or I forget what the other one was called. It was some kind of Inferno or something.
Interesting.
And it's cool because you can kind of, I don't remember if it was like that in the first game. I don't think it was.
No, so the first game, the summons were tied into materia, and it was one spell. That was it. So when you summoned Ifrit, it was the same Ifrit each time.
Yeah, so this is the same Ifrit as far as I know. I don't know if they ended up, there's a way to sort of upgrade their abilities, but every time I summoned Ifrit, I had 2 different abilities to choose from, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And it gives you a little bit more control over the summon itself versus it just being something that you quite literally summon and then you just kind of sit back and watch.
How many summons did you encounter?
Shiva, who dealt with ice magic, Ifrit, and Chocobo and Mojo or something like that. It was basically just a flock of Chocobos.
That sounds like a new one.
Yeah, there was that, and then I want to say there was one more. I don't know how many summons are in the game. There could be more than that, but I think those are the only 3 that I really dabbled with.
Did you, or were the summons tied to like specific characters? Like, did you have to equip them? Like, well, first of all, are they materia still? Did you have to equip it, and then once it's equipped, did only that character that had it equipped have access to it, or was it like a party wide thing?
Good question. So it was materia. You would put it in like a special summon materia slot.
Oh.
And it would be specific for that character. So like, let's say I'm outfitting Barrett for a boss fight. I might want him having Ifrit as a summon, but then that means that only he can summon Ifrit.
Okay.
Now, of course, I can do it because he's in my party, but they're exclusive to whatever character you have it slotted in.
Right. So I mean, you can't cast, on Cloud's turn. You have to cast it on Barrett's. Yeah, I get that.
Correct.
Yep. Did was as far as materia goes, like, what's the process for equipping that? And like, once you like learn something, like, does your character kind of remember that even if you de-equip that materia, or?
Sure. Yeah, so materia was actually the next thing I had on the list, ironically, and it worked in quite an interesting way. So I don't remember exactly how materia worked in the original. I remember vaguely, but not all the details. In this game, if you buy, say, fire materia, if you use it a lot under Cloud, eventually it will upgrade to the next star. So there are like these little stars underneath the materia, and I think you can go as far as 4 stars, and each star represents like fire, and then Firaga, and then Fyra. Like, they have all these, different names for the levels of the amount of damage you can do with it.
Right.
And if you buy fire, then you would have to buy another one if you want another character using it. So you can't just buy fire and then equip it to every single character. You have to buy multiple fires, which I don't know if it was like that in the first game.
It was.
It's okay. So then that's how it is in this game. They are upgradable. I think to upgrade them, you literally just have to use them a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if I don't recall any kind of upgrade system. You just kind of have to keep using it. So if you have ice, which I really didn't use much at all, I never ended up getting that past star 1. So it was I only had the ability to use standard ice, not the other sort of levels of them.
Okay.
So that's how that works. They're easy to equip. You just literally throw them on a bangle or, whether your armor or the weapon. So same way in the first game. And you can still do stuff like elemental fire or elemental ice, and equip that to the sword and have Cloud Sword be infused with ice or fire, or what's the other one? Lightning.
Okay.
So they have all that core stuff, and then they, I think, have some newer stuff. I didn't really mess with too much materia. I used a lot of heal and cure and basically just the core stuff: fire, lightning, occasionally ice, auto cure. There's time. There's magnify. There's elemental. There's quite a list, and
sounds
most
like they
of them
added some stuff.
Yeah, it was quite a big list. Like, I'm pretty sure I had one of almost everything, and then I had duplicates of the stuff that I was using the most. Okay. And a lot of them you find out in the world, and a lot of them you find at these little vending machines, which I can kind of spin off into next. So throughout the world, there are these vending machines with usually a bench next to it, and you can sit at the bench and essentially rest, and it'll heal Cloud and the rest of his team. Which is pretty cool because it's super quick. You just sit down, the screen kind of fades to black for like, half a second, and then you come back and your whole party is healed. Okay. But you can buy and sell items at these little vending machines that are generally next to the bench. So I would go in there, and these things would usually always pop up before a boss fight, and I'd go in and see if there was any materia that I didn't have. And it would give you this little column that would say owned and not owned.
Okay.
And it was a really quick way to say, okay, I don't have time. It looks like I'm going to buy this for 400 gil. And then you buy it, and you just kind of go about it that way, and you just kind of play around with them. What's cool too is, like, when you're in the menu and you're looking at a materia and maybe you haven't used it, they give you one of those little demonstration videos in the top right, so they show you what it looks like, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
But overall, I just didn't really dabble with it too much. I used it when it was necessary, and most of the time I just tried to cycle through my characters as best as possible and, come up with a strategic or a strategy to taking down whatever enemy was in our way.
It's interesting because like materia was a huge focus for me during my playthrough of the original. So
yeah,
I remember. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I could swear there was a mechanic where if you finished leveling up in materia, you essentially mastered it, and that materia like spawns a new unmastered version or a new unleveled version. And in which case now you can like do it again. I'm trying to remember if that's true or if you had to buy it separately. It's been 20 years.
Oh, sure.
So
and that's just it, whether it's 20 years or 10 years or 15, whatever it may be.
Right.
It's hard to remember some of those intricacies, but
yeah. Plus I've been kicked in the head a lot too, so.
But yeah, the materials, it's pretty easy to use. It's basically just, I'm going to equip this, I'm going to unequip it, whatever, and you just kind of dole it around to your characters. And of course, you still have weapons that hold more. You have bangles and armor that holds more or less. So you just kind of toy around with it and you figure out what works best. And I was never that person that would, get all complex with it and say, all right, I'm going to do elemental this, but I'm going to put it on the armor, and then I'm going to do. I just kind of slap shit on there.
Yeah.
And I used, I just would always put cure on there and just make sure I had stuff to just use basic, decent magic and whatever it's going to take for me to heal.
Right.
And I think I used revive as well, which was a really good one, which is in replace of a Phoenix down.
Yeah, that was a pretty important one if I remember. So.
Yeah, and then just kind of wrapping up the list of good, the weapon upgrade system was neat. I think I might have mentioned this on previous episodes, but there is a weapon upgrade system that I don't think was in the first game.
No.
And it basically opens up a little sort of Skyrim space tree of upgrades. So you have like these little orbs, and you can upgrade cores. So it might be subcore 1, subcore 2, subcore 3.
Okay.
And each core has like these different little expansions where you can upgrade the magic or the attack power on that particular weapon. So every time you find a new sword, like let's say you find the, let's just say the Buster Sword.
Okay.
When you get that, you're usually given a decent amount of upgrade points that you can use right away. So it's not like you really have to earn them. You just kind of get them when you get a new weapon. So you can have the ability to upgrade that weapon pretty much from the get-go, which is pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the reason why I made a note of that is because I don't know how much of an impact it really had. To be honest, like when I would upgrade weapons, I'm just not so sure if it really helped that much. It's not one of those things that you notice right away where if you're in a Souls game or any other kind of RPG where you can level up your weapon, sometimes you notice your attack power is much higher. I didn't really notice that with the upgrade system.
When you're attacking, are you seeing like damage numbers on the screen?
Yes. The only reason I hesitate is because I just don't remember them being that big if they're there.
Okay.
It's not like it's Call of Duty when you get a kill, it's like 100. So it's, I'm sure they're there. I feel bad like not really knowing this, but it's just not something I really kind of brought away from it.
Okay, I understand.
Sense of scope, I remember telling Joe about this. I was really impressed with that. I think I had mentioned before again that the Sector 7 slums plate, basically the plate that's above you when you're in the slums, is massive, and it looks very much like something you would see at a District 9, which I highly recommend that movie.
Oh, great movie, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like that spaceship that is just kind of there. And it just looks really big. It looks really real. And just a lot of those, again, those sort of reimaginations of the world, they did a really good job with the scope of things, making it sizable and sensible for the environment that you're in. So that was a really nice takeaway. Tifa in fights, immensely satisfying to use her because she's just very impactful, quite literally. Like when you're punching and she's obviously just really fast. So when you're punching enemies and you're executing somersault and star shower and all these really cool abilities, it's just fun to use her because you can just hear the punches, and she's so quick and just fun to use. And when you're bouncing back between Barret, Cloud, and Tifa's certainly not as strong as Barret and Cloud, but she's just so much fun to use. So that was a good. And then lastly, sort of mentioned this before, Packed with Style, which I really loved because most people know that I love stylistic games, and there's a lot of that in the cutscenes and even in the regular combat. Everything just looks very well done. The animations are just really, really stylistic.
Is it a cool game?
It is absolutely a cool game, Drew. It is absolutely a cool game.
All right. Just had to check.
A lot of good.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of stuff that I missed, but that is generally some basic takeaways that really stood out to me. And, I think that it's a good little list. I think it's worth, taking those good aspects and using them as a point to, buy the game or not.
I just as an aside, I want to apologize if there's noise on my microphone. Dax is literally rubbing on the microphone as we speak. So I'm making a note to try to edit that. Do not chew on that. Oh, God, I'm going to kill him.
Oh, boy.
We're having a cat issue, folks. My cat is chewing on my mouse wire because he's a dick. Okay. I'm sorry. Carry on.
No worries. So let's dive into the bad.
Yes.
All right. So length of the game clocks in at about 40 hours if you're, I guess, on pace. Took me about 44, I think, which is, obviously only about 4 hours over. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with just some challenges I had towards the rest of the game, or the end of the game, rather.
Sure.
Really annoying bosses that can be cheap. There were some bosses in this game that I think were a little bit cheap because I was doing everything correctly. It's not like I was low on health, and they would pull out some crazy move that you didn't see the entire boss fight until the end, when they have like a sliver of health and they do this one thing where something happens and it wipes your whole fucking squad out. And that happened a couple times, and it made me want to twist my controller in half.
Ugh, that's the worst.
So that wasn't fun. I wouldn't say it was game breaking, but it was certainly annoying, and I put that in my sort of bad section. The biggest thing here is overall sense of feeling stretched out. Now, I'm going to use an example that I used with Joe, and I kind of tailored this slightly differently when I was making notes, but imagine taking a piece of good quality saltwater taffy from Rhode Island, stretching it out as far as possible.
I fucking love your analogies, but go on.
and being told to eat it as slowly as you possibly can.
Uh-huh.
In other words, here's a piece of delicious saltwater taffy.
Yeah.
We make it right here in-house. I'd like you to chew it and swallow it after 40 plus hours has passed. And that's what Final Fantasy VII Remake is.
Oh my God.
It's delicious pretty much the entire time, except for the last 2 chapters. And you have to eat it very slowly. So it's like, I don't know, it's like eating candy. It's really good for like the first 5, maybe 10 minutes. And then you're like, all right, that's enough.
Now your jaw starts hurting.
But somebody's like, nope, you ain't done yet, buddy. And you're like, but I don't want any more. And you're like, well, you're going to get more. And it's going to be really sweet. And you're not going to want that sweetness anymore. And that's kind of what happens. And really what I mean by that is this game is it's a very, very good game. But it's too good for too long. And I think it just could have been as good as it was in a shorter length.
Well, I mean,
ultimately,
the section of Final Fantasy VII that they took to turn into a 40-hour game was like, I don't know, 7 hours, if that, like on the original?
Yeah, I think so.
I want to say it comprised I know it comprised all of Disc 1, but I'm trying to remember. Well, I don't know where this game exactly ends, but, and my memory, again, fuzzy, but I'm trying to remember where Disc 1 of FF7, the original, ends, too.
I'm trying to remember too. I want to say I remember it in my head, like visually, but I'm not. I excuse me. My memory does not serve me well enough to really describe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't really. It's not that I didn't want to be wrong. It's just I just don't feel like the memory's strong enough really to build on that piece.
Well, I didn't even have to finish typing it in the Google.
In the Google.
Yeah.
Apparently, you're the grandpa playing Skyrim.
I guess so. I mean, you're out of Midgar at that point. North Corel, retrieving the Keystone, Black Materia, Sephiroth, Gold Saucer, Forgotten Capital. So, yeah, I mean, it's, you're definitely out of Midgar.
Yeah.
You're definitely out of Midgar by the time Disc 1 ends. So this is like really like maybe a third of Disc 1. As far as I could tell.
Yeah, it's just stretched out. And
yeah.
I get it, I guess. Like, they wanted to create a pretty complete experience because it has been obviously a very long time that people have been waiting for this. And I think people probably would have been pissed if it was a 20-hour game.
Sure.
Maybe 30 would be the highest I'd go, but 40's pushing it a little bit.
So what did they pad the game with?
There's a lot of people saying that there's a ton of filler, and I haven't read specifics on what filler that is. I think that there's a lot of like additional cutscenes that probably didn't really need to happen, and some of them just felt kind of stretched out, slow. There were some segments with side quests, which I don't believe you really had in the first game, that added to the length. Some of them were fun, some I didn't bother with. I did most of them, so that definitely increased the length quite a bit. But I think overall it's just the pacing of what you do and some of the things that you're asked to do and whatnot. They just take longer, and some of the cutscenes and story little bits and dialogue sections they're just drawn out. I wouldn't say they're bad by any means. It's not like I was bored. It's just they were just a bit long. I think it's not that overcomplicated. I don't think it needs to be really kind of picked apart. It's just kind of the interpretation I think quite a few people had. Now, granted, there's a lot of people out there that absolutely loved every second of this game. I respect that. You know, no game is perfect, and this game I don't think is perfect. It's pretty close to being perfect at times. On another note, Aerith sucks to control.
Really?
Who you attack, basically, when you're using her in your party, it's like launching a ball of confetti at an enemy. And basically, the best thing to do is to just equip her with auto-cure and never have her do anything. And that's basically what I had her do. I was like, I used her a couple times, and I was like, all right, I'm done with skipping around. I'm done twirling my baton like I'm in color guard. And I'm done throwing the balls of confetti and doing no damage. So I'm just going to equip her with auto-cure, and it worked out great because anytime I was injured severely, you would hear, like, hang in there, or I've got you, and, like, she would just, spread pixie dust, and you'd be healed. And personally, I think that's all she's really good for.
Yeah.
Now, I've read contrary opinions that she is actually quite powerful if you have her equipped with the right staff, and you've got her with the right magic, and I'm sure that's the case, but I really did not bother with her that much, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean...
And I put that in the bad because I just personally felt like she was a weak character, but that could be completely my own fault.
A lot of the original Final Fantasy, and really Final Fantasy games in general, have this level of, like, min-maxing your character stats. It's not something that I've ever really dove into too far, but that does exist. So I'm sure, there probably is a way to make her, overpowered. But
yeah, I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last two chapters contain 58 bosses and are 10 hours each.
Jesus Christ.
And that's the bad. Obviously, I've spoken on that piece at least a few times now, and I guess to reiterate, in hindsight, it's not that bad, and I can kind of see why they did it, because it is the end of the game, so they got to, kind of pack in a punch. But I still don't, take back the fact that there are a ton of bosses that do get really annoying, that do seem a little bit unnecessary, and those 2 chapters did feel like they took me so long. And it's not because I had trouble with those bosses. I did get through them. It's just because there's so many and there's cutscenes before and after. It just becomes a lot. It becomes that Big Mac that you don't really want.
Huh.
That was just me. I mean, there were some moments in some of those boss fights that were pretty epic. It was like one scene where you're on a motorbike with, a bunch of basically the rest of your party that's in this like weird little garden pickup truck, which was really weird. It's like this little white truck that you like would think that would just be capped at 30 miles per hour, and somehow it's flying on the highway.
Yeah.
So there was that, but it was fun, and there's a lot of style within that, so that was really cool. But yeah, that's what's going on with the bad.
Is that the only item you had on your bad list?
No, all the things that I just said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Were all in my bad list. So it's basically the same amount of content as the good.
Gotcha. I understand.
Like half and half.
Yeah. So, I mean, knowing my history with the game, like, is this something that you would recommend, or you think I'm going to be disappointed, or?
I would still highly recommend it. I still think that the entire experience is 100% worth it. And not to jump into final thoughts, because we're not quite there, but I will say, if you can walk into this knowing that it's a complete remake, that there are going to be cutscenes and segments of the game that you are not familiar with, and some lengthy boss fights and a little bit of a stretched out feeling, if you can get behind those things, you're going to be fine. But if you go into it thinking that it's going to be basically a remaster that's 100% faithful to the original, then you're going to be in for a surprise, and not necessarily a bad one. It's just going to be a little bit different, and that's fine. There are some aspects of the plot that I didn't really get, but I don't think there was anything about the plot that I didn't like. Well, my biggest complaint about the game is, like I said, length. That's really it. Some of the other things are just small nitpicks.
I've heard something about them basically taking the plot of the game and rewriting the ending to kind of like open the door so that they can do things the way they want to. With the
I might as well. Yeah, I'll scroll down here to some other notes I have. So basically,
sorry to throw you off out of order.
No, it's fine. The whole point of this was to go out a little bit out of order. Yeah. So I didn't write too much about the plot because most of it is relatively faithful to the original. Yeah. But I will say the biggest thing, and most people were able to see this, is there's this introduction of ghosts or shadows or whispers, whatever you want to call them, unknown entities. I think that's what they're called when you're fighting them.
Okay.
Enigmatic sphere or specter or something like that. There's some unique names that they give them, but there's this element of these floating gray ghost shadow things that sort of appear that definitely were not in the first game. So there's a lot of that's new, and then there's a lot more Sephiroth appearances than I can recall from the original game. So
he was persona non grata for the majority of Disc 1. Sephiroth kind of like came and went. He wasn't like a large focus of it. At least not until towards the end of Disc 1.
Right. I remember seeing him, I think, on late game Disc 1 or Disc 2.
Yep.
There was some kind of, sequences where I think Cloud was like literally like with him. Again, that's just a vague memory. But yeah, there's a lot more Sephiroth appearances in this game. A lot more hallucinations from what it appears to be. A lot more memories, I guess, that Cloud is dealing with.
Is there a boss battle against him too? Like
Sephiroth?
Yeah,
he's the final boss.
Like, you don't even fight him in the first disc.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people got really sort of torn towards the end of the game, because fuck it, let's just dive in. So I'm going to tell you what happened me beating the game, because we're pretty much there.
Okay.
So it was Here, let me just make sure I didn't rip out my headphones. Okay. So it was this past Friday that I actually beat the game.
Mm-hmm.
It was at night, and it started off reasonably well, actually. I was primed and ready to defeat Sephiroth after studying strategies from YouTube, as well as just kind of correcting my own mistakes. And so, first things first, as far as I know, if you die to Sephiroth in the first phase, you have to start at the beginning leading up to fighting him. And what I mean by this is there's this portal that you go through towards the end of the game that kind of is basically the end game. Like, once you go through that portal, there's no turning back. Like, they actually give you an option where it says, like, are you sure you want to go through the portal or not? But if you don't go through, you actually still have an option to go and rest at a bench and use the vending machine, which is pretty cool. So you can stock up on your potions and your Phoenix Downs and all that kind of stuff. So needless to say, there's this portal you go through where you have to fight many phases of Whispers. And Whispers are these bosses that you basically fight before Sephiroth. And I hated them. Once those segments have been completed, you move on to Sephiroth. If you die at any point while fighting the Whispers, you have to start all over again at the portal. To me, it was infuriating, but whatever. It's just kind of how a lot of games are. I get it. Like, when you go through one of those things, they warned you, like, hey, there's no turning back. So the problem with it is you're fighting a large amount of these Whispers in many different phases, and then there's like this Whisper Behemoth or something like that. I can't remember the exact name. Then you fight like the final Whisper, and it just seems to never end. I died a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I died a lot. And if I remember correctly, it was my second or third attempt where I got to the final phase of the fight with Sephiroth. Needless to say, I died. Okay, no problem. I know the mistake I made. Now, when you die in this game to an enemy or a boss, you have the option to retry from the last battle or from the previous battle.
Okay.
Now, out of frustration from dying and a sense of urgency to try again, I made a terrible mistake.
Oh, no.
If you don't already see where this is going,
oh, no.
I chose retry from previous battle. And when I did that, I was like, oh no, Will. I was like, what did you do, you dumb fuck? And you were so close, because I'm pretty sure that, like, when you get to a certain phase with Sephiroth, you don't go back to the beginning. You actually go back to the beginning of fighting him, which is what I wanted to do. And instead, I fucked up and I had to fight the Whispers all over again, which takes at least 20 minutes or so. And it's a horrible battle. Like, I hate doing it. So I was pissed. I nearly shut the whole thing off, and I was like, no, I've come this far. I'm not doing this. So I proceed to do so. I proceed to fight them again, and I completed all of the phases of the Whispers, and I thought, let me pause here, take a breather, and plug my MacBook in as the battery is low. Now, I want to cry just having to think about what happens while trying to carry out this simple task. Now, behind our couch, there's a power strip.
Yep.
Oh
no!
Yeah, it's a dark setting, as I had all the lights off. I grabbed the power strip, and since it's dark, I'm fumbling it like a hot potato, and I'm draped over the couch, just reliving the agony of trying to plug in a USB cord in the right way. And I hit the power switch accidentally on the strip and turn off the PS4, TV, PlayStation 3, and the entire rest of my life.
I'm like, now, I wish you could see me cringing right now.
Yeah. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my fucking God, I really just turned off everything. I just turned off everything. Now, normally this would be a sign to go to bed and try again tomorrow.
Right.
But since I had come so far already, I wipe away my tears and I try again. Now, I do something next that I have not done since I was a teenager or younger.
Is it hucking the controller at the TV? Because it should be.
Options, game settings, difficulty, easy, baby. Fucking easy I change it to, guy. So, at this point, a tidal wave of relief washes over me and I proceed to mindlessly melt the whispers away, followed by Sephiroth. I couldn't help but feel slightly ashamed of what I had done. But you know what, Drew? I beat the goddamn game. And at that moment, that was all that mattered.
Oh, God. Well, I commend you
did it, dude.
I commend you for doing what needed to be done.
Oh, dude, it had to be done.
Man, I mean, I kind of did the same thing with Doom Eternal. So, like, this is definitely something that has happened really, really recently. You know, I just got to a point where I was like, fuck it. I just got to beat this game. And I just put it on easy and I, like, just started melting stuff.
Oh, yeah. I felt bad doing it, dude, because, like, once I was fighting Sephiroth, like, and even the Whispers, everything was just so much faster. Like, my ATB gauges were going up through the roof. I wasn't getting hurt as much. And it felt more balanced. It wasn't like I wasn't completely just melting them. It actually felt a little bit better, but at the same time, it's just a little bit too easy. But I really felt like after all that shit that I had gone through, it was just kind of justified.
So while you've been talking about this, you've been talking about these whispers, and they are not from the original game. I looked into this while you were kind of running down your trials and tribulations here. And the whispers, this is according to Final Fantasy fandom.com or some shit. The whispers appear whenever events start to diverge from the plot of the original Final Fantasy VII. According to Whisper Harbinger's description, they appear when someone tries to alter Destiny's course, as someone is implied to be Sephiroth. So this is, it sounds like Square is trying to get out of killing Ares and all that fun stuff, and basically just rewrite the game with the characters that everybody has loved for 20 years. Perhaps. Because everything that you've talked about this boss battle and stuff, none of that exists. There are no portals in Final Fantasy VII that I'm aware of.
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, granted, again, it's hard for me to say because I never completed the first game, but I certainly don't remember that on disc 1 or 2.
I did, and I don't remember there being any portals.
Yeah, so...
And I admit my memory is not what it used to be. You know, like, I played that game very thoroughly one time in 1997. And, you know, I played the shit out of it. I beat it. I overbeat it. Got everything I possibly could get out of it. And then I never touched it again.
And rightfully so. I mean, it's a great game, I'm sure. But it's one of those games that really is so long and so impactful that there isn't really a sense of urgency to go back to it either ever or not for a long time.
It would be nostalgia, you know? I mean, every time I pop it in, I get those warm fuzzies, and I'll play a little bit of Midgar, and then I'll never touch it again. Because I know it's a 40 plus 80-hour game, whatever.
Exactly. And I think that's what made this game so special, kind of just moving into, I guess, final thoughts is, you know, actually, there are a couple other memorable moments I wanted to point out quickly. But basically, a few things that were really cool. Let me just make sure I'm not going to repeat anything here. Fighting some of the familiar bosses that were in the original game, like Reno. I'm sure you remember Reno.
Vaguely,
those were a ton of fun.
Okay.
The other one, I forget what the robot was. It was some kind of mech that you fight towards the beginning. It was like Sweeper or something like that.
Yeah.
Scorpion, whatever. Those kind of things that you absolutely vividly remember from the original game are there, and they're awesome. Like, actually being able to fight those enemies again was a ton of fun. That was definitely a memorable moment. Doing squats at the gym. Everybody remembers that. Big thing for me was walking into Seventh Heaven Bar for the first time and being able to play darts, and you see Marlene and, you know, Barrett's hanging out with her, and all the stuff that you remember from the first game. They did all of that really well, and it was really heartwarming. And just warming in itself to be able to listen to these remixed versions of Tifa's theme and Aerith's theme on this jukebox that plays. There's a lot of jukeboxes that are all around, by the way, in the game, and you'll hear a song that sounds really familiar, or you'll hear something that isn't familiar, and you can go up to the jukebox and actually buy that disc. So throughout most of the game, I would go up to that jukebox and buy the disc, and you just collect them. And then at any point when you get to another jukebox, you can either collect another one, or you can just go up to it and play all of the ones that you collected, which is pretty cool.
That's nice. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, so you can listen to like this techno version of Prelude, which is really cool. I'm sure maybe some of that stuff is on the soundtrack. I'm not sure, but it was cool. It was fun. The NPCs all have unique dialogue when you're running around Sector 7 slums. So I remember mentioning this, I think, on my first impressions way back when I first got the game, and it's still really prevalent. Like, you can walk around some of those areas at train stations or whatever and hear legit full conversations between random NPCs that are all unique. And that was a really nice touch with, from a detail perspective. So I really enjoyed that. I
remember the demo kind of giving you a taste of that with, some of the Avalanche members kind of chatting.
Mm-hmm.
That was really, really cool.
Yeah. And I guess like really the last thing for just memorable moments is overall just the feeling and the nostalgia that you get. And I know I've touched on this already, but that was the biggest takeaway for me. Just dealing with or just experiencing running through those Sector 7 slums and looking at the plate above you and all of these things that you imagined in your mind the first time you played the game back in, 97?
Yeah.
It really comes to life in this game. They did a tremendous job. I've got to say that overall, I think they really did a great job, giving us, the fans, what we wanted and what we always kind of dreamt about all of these years. So I'm happy with that.
That's good. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, and ultimately, final thoughts really kind of, again, circle back to what I said already. If you can accept that this is a full remake and there are changes to many segments of the game, then you're going to enjoy it. And I think I'm in that camp.
Okay.
Because I really did enjoy the game. I ultimately just wish it was shorter and that the last two chapters weren't so jam-packed. But at the end of the day, it's really fun. It's great exploring the world and was really touching and strangely familiar.
So there's a lot of mystery shrouded in what happens next with the remake, as it were. What would you like from a part 2? And first of all, would you buy the next part?
Would I buy the next part?
Yeah.
I think so. I don't know if it would be day one. It would depend on whatever my backlog is looking like, but it would definitely be bought. I definitely want to see where they're going to go with it. I'd love to see characters return like Vincent and Yuffie and Sid and see some of the rest of the open world map. I'd like to see them bring the buggy back that you used in the map. All of those little things that I remember, I want to see them reimagined. I want to make sure, or I really hope that they continue with what they've done with this game in terms of the quality. As long as the same quality is going to be there, which I'm sure it will be, then I'm really curious to see where it goes. But yeah, I don't know if it's day one. It'll probably be like month 1, if that makes sense, that I would get the game.
Totally.
I'd probably wait for a couple reviews, see if people are playing it, be like, all right, let's see what's going on with it. Yeah. But I just don't, I don't know if it's going to be an absolute pre-order.
Okay. If you had to give this like a rating, where would that be on your scale?
Sure. If we do a scale from 1 to 10, I would say it's between a 7 or an 8. Probably more so an 8.
Okay.
I want to give it a higher review because ultimately, even though those last 2 chapters, and I have a few nitpicks here and there, the amount of good really kind of surpasses that.
Interesting.
So I'm going to go with 8. Final answer.
I like it. All right.
Solid 8 too.
That's a strong rating.
Yeah, and I think it deserves it. It's a very well done game. And, one last thing, just in terms of the plot, there is a lot of confusion regarding the ending of the game because they do bring back a character named Zach. who apparently was in the first game. I never made it that far to experience who Zack was and what that backstory is, but apparently it ties in with some of Crisis Core, I want to say. I don't have my facts straight on all of this because I really have done very little research. I watched one video kind of explaining the ending of this game, and I understood a little bit, but I didn't pay that close attention, so I'd like to do more research. But there is a sort of reintroduction of Zack in late game and at the very end of the game in the final cutscene, and I believe it ends with the words, "The unknown journey will continue."
Okay.
And then the credits roll. So clearly there will be another one.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be two more or one more, but at this rate, I would say hopefully two more games get out of this.
It sounds like they're going to make Zack a playable character. So
probably.
So Zack is like Cloud's training buddy. When they were in Soldier together, if I recall.
Yes.
Zack is essentially an NPC in the original game. He only appears in, I think, maybe a flashback or two tops. He is one of the main characters in Crisis Core, which was a PSP game. But like that's like a deep cut as far as Final Fantasy franchise goes. You know, like they're dragging out a character that nobody gives a shit about. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of led to some of the mixed reviews and some of the sort of reaction videos that you can find on YouTube, which were way more prevalent at the time of sort of release. Like I would say month one of this game being out, there was a lot of that kind of stuff circulating. But for me, it was just a little bit more confusing because since I never completed the first game and since they have changed a lot in terms of how this game ends, that it does raise a lot of questions. And thankfully, I wasn't the only one that had those questions. I like the ending.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed fitting. But just having to fight Sephiroth that quickly just feels, I don't know, just feels a little odd.
It sounds like I don't know, man. I still have mixed feelings after listening to you go in depth on it. I still have very mixed feelings about what I would be potentially getting into.
Yeah, and I think you should, because I don't think you have to approach this game with caution, but you do have to realize that there are some things that may cause you to hesitate still.
I mean, everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot that's different. There's a lot that's the same.
Right.
And I think that's what made this review of mine a little bit more in depth than I normally do, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of like mixed emotions and just sort of mixed feelings about where this game goes. And I think Maximilian Dude, who I really enjoy on YouTube, he said when there's a high, the highs are really high. But then when there's a low, they're pretty low. So you kind of have a little bit of a roller coaster, I think is how he put it.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
But overall, I still think it's a solid experience. It's just long, dude. You know, it's just a long game. I've been playing it since March.
Yeah, it came out. It came out in April, I believe.
Okay,
it was supposed to come out in March. It got pushed back.
Okay, so I've been playing it since April, and it's now July 13th. So it's been a little while.
Yeah, been a minute.
Yeah, so that's it, man. That's all I got.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of dive into this in depth. I still want to check the game out. You've kind of answered some of my concerns. You've raised some new ones. And I don't have a lot to say because it kind of ended up being exactly what I was afraid of. If that makes sense?
Sure. No, it does. I mean, there are still legitimate concerns that people have about even just the combat system. Yeah. And it's one of those things that either it just kind of clicks with you or it doesn't. And thankfully it clicked for me. But, you know, I'm sure there are other people out there where, like I said, it just didn't. And they either scrapped the game or they just kind of dealt with it.
Do you think this is gonna be the part 2 is gonna be on the PS4 or the PS5?
You know what I think? Probably both. I think I could see them doing both for all of it. Like they'll do, like if there's 2 more parts, you'll see them on PS4 and you'll see them on PS5, hopefully, but absolutely PS4. I don't think they're going to be like, all right, PS5 only for the next 2. Yeah. But, I guess you never know. But realistically, I think we're going to see it on both.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But I think like Joe said when I spoke to him when we were playing Battlefield the other night, we were talking about the game briefly, and he's like, "Yeah, when I was done with it, dude, I deleted it." And honestly, I think I've already deleted it. It might still be there, and it's not just out of like, "Hey, like fuck this game." I think for us, it's just like we're done.
Yeah, you're never going
back. Full
back.
stop.
You're
like
never
this
going
is
back to it.
Probably not, dude. I mean, like the way the game ends, like they certainly open up the doors into like a new game plus type continuation, but I was not interested in doing that at all. I was like, get me back to the main menu, let me just kind of save it up and we're going to log off.
I just, in my wildest dreams, I don't know how in any game somebody could spend 20 to 40 hours or more with a game, beat it, and then immediately restart it with a new game plus. That has just never been something I have ever done.
Oh, dude, I don't get it, man. Like, I actually read a comment on a YouTube video. I think it was on an FF7 Remake YouTube video. And the person said, oh, yeah, like, I can't wait to start another game. It's all I want to do is just play it again. I'm just like, who are you?
Yeah,
first of all, like, where do you have the time to do this? And second of all, why?
There's so many games out there that are deserving of your attention. Like,
yeah,
if it were a shorter game, sure, maybe. But 40 hours is a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, I'm not saying, like, why as in this is a bad game, why would you ever want to play it again? It's just I see it as, like, a movie that is really, really good, but you just don't watch it again.
Right.
Because you got your fill, you're going to remember it, and you just don't watch it again.
Exactly.
I can actually think of one right now, 12 Years a Slave, actually. I really like that movie. It's a pretty powerful film.
Yeah.
Any film like that that's really powerful, I personally think that it only requires one viewing. It's like Schindler's List. It's not like, I think Damien said it's like, you don't have a Schindler's List watching party.
Yeah.
And you watch it once and it's a great film and you're done.
Yep. No, that's a great way to put it.
But this is exactly what FF7 is. Absolute great game, great experience, but I just don't think I'd ever return to part 1. Maybe in 3-4 years,
right?
If that.
So,
but it's exhausting.
What's next for William Grobbelaar?
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking about taking a break from a lot of just sort of intense AAA games and going into something a little bit more relaxed. So I'm kind of thinking about The Last Guardian or Shadow of the Colossus.
Okay.
Something that's a little bit more of an experience rather than something that's just really kind of, in the thick of it.
Right. Because you did start The Last of Us 2.
I did, yeah. And I think I needed to take just a mental break. That game is just powerful, man. It is powerful and deep and dark. And so far, it's been a pretty masterful experience, and I mean that. The graphics are incredible. In fact, it's probably the best-looking game I think I've ever played. But, just very, very dark, heavy subject matter, and I think that if you're not in a place to be dealing with that, or if you don't want to, dive into something that's that serious, then it's not a great game to be playing right now. But if you want to do something a little different, I encourage you to do so. I guess that's my advice to anybody that's listening that is thinking about getting The Last of Us 2. I 100% encourage you to play it, but just make sure that, you just have that mental capacity to deal with some pretty serious shit.
I wouldn't fault you for taking a break from it.
Yeah, it's just heavy. I mean, we talked about it before the show. I just got done playing The Last of Us 1, and to jump right into 2 is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous from a mental standpoint because it's heavy, man. It's just a heavy game.
It is.
It's not something you kick back on a, beautiful Thursday afternoon at 3:00 with the sun out and a margarita. You play that game at night and you're anxious and you're hunched over your chair and you're dealing with some heavy storylines.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm about 30 hours into it, and I suspect I'll probably beat it this week. So,
that's cool. I mean, I'm looking forward to you beating it, and whether or not I go back to it now or later, we'll see. But
yeah,
I certainly think I'm probably going to take a break.
Yeah, I can't fault you for that. I really can't. It's a lot to go from the first game almost immediately right into the second game.
Yeah, and they really ramped it up. So,
yep. All right. Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap the show up?
No. I just think that I hope somebody can walk away from this review learning a little bit more about Final Fantasy VII, and if it sounds like a game that you want to play, I encourage you to play it. If it doesn't, then don't play it.
Well, I learned some stuff, so at least at least you got that.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that very thorough review with me, man. I think I want to play it. I think I need to wait for it to go on sale. I think after hearing you talk about it, I think $20 is my new price point.
Hey, man, I respect it. I absolutely wholeheartedly respect that decision.
And I have no problem waiting for it to hit that either.
Yeah, and I think it will. I don't know when. Probably later this year.
Black Friday at this point.
Yeah, scoop it up.
Mm-hmm.
And if it ends up being shite for you, then it's a $20 loss, and I guess that's it.
I'll get $20 of fun out of it.
Would you get a physical?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So if anything, you could trade it or just sell it or something.
Yeah. I mean, it'll. I don't trade games, so I'll have it for the rest of time. But
okay. Well, yeah.
So anyway, thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. Check us out on the web at WDGRPodcast.com. Hit us up Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at WDGRPodcast. You can follow me at ScionStorm. Will, how can they find you?
Will_gear.
That's where you send all of your Final Fantasy VII Remake hate mail. And
don't flood me.
Don't flood me, bro.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.